It began at 10:45 p.m., a time when most of the island was winding down. But in the command center of the Aegis Ashore site, a facility hidden from public eyes, built into the landscape like a fortress disguised as just another patch of jungle, no one ever slept. Our satellites never slept either. That night, one of those satellites caught a flicker, an intense heat signature blooming over the empty Pacific. At first glance, it looked like a small supernova, a burst of white-hot energy in the middle of nowhere. Nothing natural could burn that bright. Nothing harmless travels that fast. Within seconds, earlier than our brains could process it emotionally, the system processed it technically. We had trained for this, simulated it, memorized every procedure down to muscle memory. Yet when the alarms started screaming through the corridors, when the red lights glowed against the steel walls, it suddenly felt more real than anything I had experienced before. This wasn't a drill, not a scheduled test, not some coordinated evaluation. This was the scenario no one admits they fear until it happens. A missile was coming, and it wasn't coming slowly. I ran into the operations room just as the AN-TPY-6 radar finished booting into one of its active defensive modes. The TPY-6 was still considered new back then, though for us it already felt like the island's mechanical guardian, an enormous four-sided titan that silently watched the sky from its concrete tower. Each face of the radar array stood nearly 60 feet tall, taller than most apartment buildings in Agana. At sunrise, they gleamed like obsidian plates. At night, they loomed like monoliths staring into the void. Together, they could see nearly 1,000 miles in any direction. Some said the real range was much more, but that was something only Washington truly knew. What mattered in that moment was that the radar saw everything, and it saw the missile better than anything built before it. "Separation event," one of the watch officers announced. His voice didn't quite crack, but it wasn't steady either. His eyes were fixed on the screen. "Decoys observed, rocket body confirmed." That was the moment I understood we were facing a serious threat. Ballistic missiles don't fly clean. They shed. They peel away pieces as they surge through the sky. Scraps of booster, shards of thermal protection, even purpose-built countermeasures meant to trick our tracking systems. On older radars, the warhead would blur into the debris field, lost in a scatter of objects falling just as fast. Not this time. Not with the TPY-6. Even as the incoming missile cast off clouds of scrap metal and disguised itself in a cluttered halo of junk, the radar didn't flinch. It isolated the warhead instantly, one bright, lethal streak of data against a haze of meaningless dots. I watched the radar's filtered image as it pulsed across the screen in rhythmic intervals, and for a moment, I felt something dangerous. Confidence. We didn't have minutes. We barely had seconds. When a missile races at hypersonic speeds, time doesn't pass in moments. It falls away like sand, grain by grain, too fast to catch. The commanding officer, someone who always looked carved from granite, even in ordinary daylight, leaned forward and gave the order without hesitation. "Prepare to launch SM-3. Block OIA." There was nothing dramatic about the moment. No shouting, no panicked scrambling. Just a series of acknowledgements, crisp and clipped, each one sealing the fate of the incoming threat. I remember the ground vibrating as the missile shot upward from its launch cell, the air shaking with a heavy, controlled fury. The SM-3 Block 2IA never feels like a weapon. It feels like a promise, a spear of pure precision meant for one purpose: to hit something far beyond where human senses can reach. Its plume lit the sky with a brief, ghostly glow. The missile soared, chasing a target we could not see with our eyes, but could feel in the tension gripping the room. As it closed the distance, telemetry filled the space like a heartbeat. Mid-course guidance online. Kill vehicle separation initiated. Target lock stable. There was a silence, the kind that stretches a second into something much longer. Then, direct hit. One phrase, one exhale, a threat erased somewhere high above the Pacific, so far from the island that no one on Guam ever knew how close they had come. The pieces of the destroyed missile fell into the black waters below, unseen and unheard. Our test, though we didn't know it at first, was a complete success. The next morning, the island woke to sunlight and ocean breeze. Tourists swam in Tumen Bay. Locals went to work. The world kept turning as if nothing had happened. The news never reported it. There were no headlines, no public alerts, no triumphant announcements. For most people, it was as if the event had never occurred at all. But the truth was unfolding far beyond our small island. Because the test wasn't random. It wasn't done in peace. It was done at a time when the Pacific was changing faster than at any point in my lifetime. Just weeks earlier, North Korea had conducted its most provocative launch to date. Pyongyang touted the Hwasong-16B as a miracle weapon. Solid fuel, supposedly hypersonic, supposedly reaching Mach 12. Most of us dismissed the exact numbers as propaganda. But even propaganda can hide something real. Solid fuel meant faster launch times. Hypersonic maneuverability meant unpredictable trajectories. And North Korea wasn't acting alone. Russia had begun openly lending its hand, offering technical assistance that once would have been unthinkable. China, meanwhile, was growing bolder with every passing month. Their missile inventory had ballooned, reaching numbers the world once believed impossible. 5,000 missiles, hundreds of launchers, systems designed to overwhelm defenses through sheer saturation. The message was clear. If conflict ever broke out, they wouldn't fire one missile. They would fire hundreds, thousands. And Guam, our small island in the Pacific, would be one of the first targets. Before I came here, Guam was a name I barely recognized. A distant U.S. territory whose history was rarely taught outside niche circles. But once you live here, once you feel the humid wind and taste the salt in the air, you understand what makes the island so important. It sits in the middle of the second island chain, a line of territories stretching from Japan down through the Philippines and past Micronesia. China has spent years trying to dominate the first island chain, the waters enclosing Taiwan, the South China Sea, the Paracels, the Spratlys. Guam is the next barrier, the next fortress, the next gatekeeper, Lurs Guam, and the door to the Pacific swings wide open. That's why Washington has poured billions into transforming the island into what some call Fortress Guam. Patriot batteries, THAAD, Aegis ashore, submarines, bombers, all working in layered harmony. But even that isn't enough. Not against the possibility of thousands of missiles falling from the sky. I had the chance to meet forces from Japan and South Korea during joint exercises. They're dedicated, skilled, and proud. But their systems aren't complete. Both rely heavily on U.S. technology. Both face budget constraints, political restraints, and geographic dangers that make missile defense incredibly complicated. Japan tried to build its own Aegis ashore sites, but booster drops threatened civilian areas. Costs exploded. Local resistance forced the project to halt. South Korea possesses THAAD and Patriot systems, but their Navy's destroyers lack SM-3s, limiting their ability to intercept missiles early in flight. So the United States fills in the gaps. deploying Aegis destroyers and cruisers around the clock. Forward deployed vessels sail constantly near Japan, the Korean Peninsula, the Taiwan Strait. Dozens more rotate in and out from Pearl Harbor, San Diego, and Everett, but the math remains brutal. China's Navy, though less experienced, outnumbers U.S. forces in the region. Quantity has a quality all its own, which means if war came, the seas would become a battleground of overwhelming force. One evening, months after the test, I stood on a cliff overlooking the water, watching the sunset turn the ocean gold. And I wondered, what if things truly went wrong? What if China or North Korea launched missiles not as a test or demonstration, but with the intent to kill? What would stop them? The answer, I learned, lay not on land or in the sky, but beneath the waves. 4 converted Ohio-class guided missile submarines, each carrying 154 Tomahawks, roam unseen in the Indo-Pacific. Their existence is like a secret held just loudly enough for adversaries to hear. They don't deter through presence. They deter through fear of the unknown. A submarine you can't find is a threat you can't kill. And a threat you can't kill is one you must respect. If the unthinkable happened, if Guam were attacked, those submarines would unleash a counterstrike that could erase entire missile networks across China and North Korea before the enemy even realized they had lost. Sometimes late at night, I think about that intercepted missile, where it came from, why it was launched, whether it truly was a test or something more probing, more dangerous. I don't know the answers. Maybe no one outside the highest circles ever will. But I do know this. The Pacific is changing. The balance of power is shifting. And Guam, this small island of palm trees, jungle, and coral reefs, now stands at the center of a storm larger than any of us living here. The night we intercepted that missile wasn't a victory. It was a warning, a glimpse of a future we hope never arrives. But if it does, we'll be ready. Because that's what this island has become. A shield, sharpened by necessity, hardened by tension, and held aloft by thousands of men and women who know what's at stake. And as long as we watch the skies, as long as our radars sweep the horizon, as long as missiles sleep in their silos and submarines glide silently below us, the Pacific will remain free. At least for now.